It was early in the morning. The sun was just beginning to break the horizon, casting golden rays over the sleeping countryside. Thomas, a young man of 22, was driving his old pickup truck down the dusty road to his first job of the day. A grass cutter for several years, he appreciated these moments of calm before plunging into physical labor. The steady sound of the engine and the smell of worn metal tools gave him a comforting sense of routine. That morning, as he drove down a country road, his mind was consumed with deep thoughts about the future. At 22, he wondered what life had in store for him. A more stable job? Maybe a family? He sighed thinking about the dreams he had, but also the obstacles that stood in his way. As he was lost in thought, imagining the shapes he could carve into customers' lawns, his eye was drawn to a figure at the bus stop on the side of the road. A white woman, young and pregnant, stood there, her round belly betraying the imminence of her delivery. She seemed uneasy, scanning the horizon as if desperately waiting for something or someone. Thomas instinctively slowed down, his instinct telling him that perhaps there was something more to this scene than what his eyes saw. He hesitated for a moment, then stopped next to her, rolling down the window of his truck. His tools rattled lightly in the back of the vehicle, breaking the silence of the morning. "Hello, miss, is everything okay? Do you need help?" he asked in a soft voice, but tinged with a certain worry. The woman looked up at him, a glimmer of hope crossing her tired eyes. His trembling voice replied, "Yes, I think I need help. My bus doesn't arrive, and I have to go to the hospital. I'm afraid the baby will arrive earlier than expected." Thomas felt a shiver run down his spine. It wasn't the first time he had helped someone, but never in such a delicate situation. He knew that the minutes counted, and in this suspended moment, a decision had to be made. Thomas took a deep breath, aware of the urgency of the situation. "Get in, I'll take you there right away." The woman, whose face relaxed slightly, nodded in gratitude. Carefully, she got into the van, settling into the passenger seat with some difficulty due to her round belly. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice tinged with relief. Thomas quickly started the vehicle, concentrating on the road ahead of him, but occasionally glancing worriedly at his passenger. "What's your name?" he asked to break the palpable tension. "Claire," she replied softly. "And you?" "Thomas." He offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Claire. We'll be at the hospital in no time." The road seemed longer than usual, each second stretched by the urgency of the situation. Thomas felt his heart beat faster with each visible contraction of Claire, who instinctively squeezed her hands on her stomach. He accelerated slightly, careful not to rush the vehicle. "Do you live far from here?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation lively to calm the atmosphere. "Yes, a little, but this morning I left to visit my mother. I didn't expect the baby to come so quickly," she replied, nervousness creeping into her voice. Thomas nodded. "We're almost there. Hold fast." They finally arrived at the hospital, a small white structure with blue shutters that stood out in the morning light. Thomas stopped in front of the emergency entrance, and before he could even get out of the van, a nurse noticed the situation and quickly approached. "I think she's going to give birth," Thomas said, his eyes reflecting worry. The nurse nodded, then addressed Claire with a professional smile. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll take care of you." With Thomas's help, they helped Claire out of the vehicle and took her inside. Thomas stood outside for a moment, his heart still beating hard from the adrenaline. He hadn't expected his day to start like this, but he felt strangely happy that he was able to be there to help someone in such a critical moment. After a few minutes, he decided to go back into the hospital to make sure everything was okay. Inside, he found Claire on a rolling bed, ready to be taken to the labor room. She smiled at him weakly, but sincerely. "Thank you, Thomas. You were a real angel today." Thomas, a little embarrassed, shook his head. "I only did what was necessary. Take care of yourself, and I hope everything goes well." As Thomas prepared to leave the hospital, Claire took his hand, a gesture full of gratitude, but also something deeper, almost mysterious. "Wait," she said, her voice still weak but determined. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of folded paper which she handed to Thomas. Surprised, he took the paper without saying anything, his eyes meeting Claire's one last time before smiling at her and heading towards the exit. He only opened the paper once he got back into his van, curious to find out what she could have written to him. Inside, fine and elegant writing outlined a few words. "Meet me at this address next week. It's important. Clear." Below the message, an address was written, that of a house located a good distance from the city. Thomas remained silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the paper. This meeting, already strange in itself, suddenly took an even more mysterious turn. Why did Claire want him to join her? And why hadn't she given him more explanations? Curiosity piqued him, but he knew the questions would only be answered when he visited this address. He put the paper in his pocket, his mind now occupied by this unexpected riddle. The week passed slowly, each day marked by the anticipation of this unknown meeting. Thomas continued his work as a grass cutter, but his thoughts kept returning to Claire and what awaited him. When the day came, he got up earlier than usual, his heart beating at the thought of this new encounter. He took care to choose simple but clean clothes, then got into his van, Claire's address in mind. The journey to Claire's house took Thomas through neighborhoods where the homes of the rich stood proudly, imposing and well-kept. These houses, often surrounded by perfectly trimmed gardens, seemed to belong to another world, far from the simplicity of the life he led. The paved roads, the wrought iron fences, everything exuded luxury and comfort. But Thomas was not impressed by these outward signs of wealth. He had always judged people by their hearts rather than by their possessions. As he approached the indicated address, he felt a slight apprehension. Why did Claire, a woman he had barely met, want to see him again in such an opulent place? His curiosity grew at every turn in the road, but he was also aware that this meeting could change the course of his life. Claire's house was an elegant colonial-style residence, nestled in the middle of a large garden lined with flowering rose bushes. A gravel driveway led to a stately front entrance, where large solid wood doors awaited. Thomas took a deep breath before getting out of his van, feeling both excitement and worry at what awaited him. He knocked gently on the door, and after a few seconds that seemed like forever, the door slowly opened. An older woman, with a gentle but aged face, smiled politely at him. "You must be Thomas," she said in a warm voice.
"Claire told me about you."
"Come in, please." Thomas entered, following the woman through a spacious entrance hall decorated with antique paintings and dark wooden furniture. He immediately felt a welcoming atmosphere, despite the apparent luxury. "Claire is waiting for you in the living room," the woman continued. "I am Madeline, his housekeeper. If you need anything, don't hesitate." She pointed to a large double door, then slipped away discreetly. Thomas stepped forward, slightly nervous, and pushed the door open. The living room was spacious, bright, with large windows overlooking the garden. Claire was sitting on a soft sofa, wearing a simple but elegant dress. Her belly was now less prominent, a sign that the birth had indeed taken place. At the sight of Thomas, a broad smile lit up his face. She stood up carefully and walked towards him. "Thomas, I'm so happy you came. Sit down. We have a lot to discuss." He sat down in an armchair across from her, observing her expression, which was both happy and serious. She took a deep breath before starting to speak. "I owe you so much thanks for what you did the other day. Without you, I don't know what could have happened to my baby. But that's not the only reason I wanted to see you." Thomas remained silent, waiting for her to continue, while his mind tried to guess what she had to say. "There is something you need to know," she continued. "It is no coincidence that our paths crossed." She paused, searching for words. Claire took a deep breath, Thomas's gaze fixed on her with curiosity mixed with worry. She got up from the couch and began pacing around the room, obviously trying to collect her thoughts before continuing. "Thomas," she began in a trembling voice, "I haven't been completely honest with you. The day we met, I was in despair, not just because of the baby's imminent arrival, but also because of the situation I find myself in. The father of my child, he betrayed me in the worst way." Thomas frowned, unsure how to respond. He felt that Claire carried a heavy burden, something she had to share, but which cost her greatly. "We had been together for a few years," she continued. "At first everything seemed perfect. He made me believe that he loved me, that he wanted to start a family with me. But as soon as I found out I was pregnant, everything changed. He started to become distant, cold. I ended up discovering that he had another life, another family, which he had been hiding from me all along." Claire's words echoed in the room like a painful echo. Thomas felt bad for her, but he was also shocked by what he heard. "I confronted him," she continued, "and he became violent and threatening. He wanted me to disappear, to have an abortion, but I couldn't. He was my child, our child. So I made the decision to run away, to rebuild my life away from him. But it's not that simple. He is powerful, influential, and he never gives up on what he wants." Thomas nodded, trying to imagine the nightmare Claire had experienced. But there was still one question that troubled him. "Why did you ask me to come here, Claire? How can I help you?" Claire stopped walking and sat down again, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Because I need your help, Thomas. After the baby was born, I contacted my lawyers to make sure this man could never approach me or our child. But I can't fight alone. I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't tied down, someone who has already proven they're caring, like you have. I know it's a lot to ask, but I need you to stay by my side, to watch over us, to be the support I can't find elsewhere." Thomas was surprised by this request. He had never thought that his spontaneous gesture that morning would take him on such a complex and involving path. But looking at Claire, he saw a woman who was vulnerable, but determined to protect her child at all costs. He felt like he couldn't let her face this alone. "I don't know what I could do, but I'm ready to help you," he replied after a moment of reflection. "You can count on me, Claire." Claire smiled through her tears, an expression of relief, mixed with gratitude. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispered. "You have no idea how much your support means to me." She gently squeezed his hand, as if to seal this unexpected alliance. Together, they knew they would face many obstacles, but now they had a common reason to fight, to protect an innocent life from the shadows of the past. This is how this story ends, but for Thomas and Claire, it is the beginning of a new chapter. Their story reminds us that even in the most unexpected times, there is always a glimmer of hope, a path to a better future.